All right. Welcome, everybody, and thank you for joining us. Welcome back to the Loyal Sons podcast. I am joined by my co-host, Jared C. and Brett. Thank you again for joining me, gents. How we doing this week?
Good. Cannot complain.
You can't?
Well, I can, but no one will care.
Yeah, I find that
My
too.
grandma always said, complaining is like a rocking chair. It's fun, but it gets you nowhere.
It's true. I thought that's what they said about worrying.
Same.
What about you, Jared? How's the week going? I know after Iowa State's game on Saturday, you probably had a little bit of a tougher afternoon. Sure you recovered well.
I actually handled it pretty well.
Okay.
Most of my time was focusing on a lot of fans that were thinking it was the end of the world and the sky is falling and we're not going to win another game this season. But no, I handled it pretty well.
You're probably talking about the group text that we were in.
I am 100%.
You, Jared, you are the shining light of positivity in our group. That is for sure. And your outlook on them is on the Iowa State Cyclones, no matter what sport it is very refreshing. So I always appreciate that about you. And again, welcome to everybody that has joined us today. We are recording on Monday, the 13th. This is our week 7 recap and week 8 preview. And we are, again, the loyal sons of the Iowa State Cyclones, the great state of Iowa, the mighty Midwest, and the greatest conference in all of college sports, which is the Big 12 Conference. Now, Jared and I and Brett both made a promise as well, starting out in week 1, that as we are the loyal sons of the Midwest, we would be covering, our neighbors to the east and the west, which are the Iowa Hawkeyes and the Nebraska Cornhuskers. And we listen to feedback, we take it to heart. And a few of us heard feedback from some of our listeners that are in the Midwest, that happen to be in our home areas, that enjoy the podcast, and they would appreciate us covering, the Huskers and the Hawks. So we do have a section of our episodes moving forward dedicated to the Iowa Hawkeyes and the Nebraska Cornhuskers, and we look to recap their games, give our thoughts, and also preview their upcoming games as well, as they're both in a pretty crazy spot right now going through the season. So let's kick it off. Boys, I don't know what to say. So Iowa State goes to Boulder. This was a game that everybody and their mother thought that Iowa State was going to walk out of this game with maybe not a blowout victory, but a victory, and not have to stress the entire game. It was going to be one of those games where you're kind of like Arkansas State. Well, you know what? They're not playing the best, but we just know they're going to win. They go into Boulder, and it was a confusing, crazy, chaotic game. Abu Sama looked absolutely freaking amazing. Talk about a game that guy needed. But looking back on the game, before I even say anything, I'm going to throw it over to you, Jared. What are your thoughts?
Not as bad as a fan base would have you believe. We outgained them. Sama was great. I think 177 yards on the ground by himself. I think we had 239 total on the ground. Mental mistakes have been our issue the last 2 weeks. We outgained them over total yards. The week before against Cincinnati, they outgained us by 4 yards. It's penalties and it's mental mistakes, a lot of drops, a lot of bad errors, a lot of bad luck. It seems like the play calling is kind of off, but we should have pulled that one together. I don't want to talk about the penalty because
let's not.
I could talk about that for an hour.
Yeah.
I do want to say real quick what I said in our group chat instantly, and then I added the picture of Lazard getting tackled against K-State because I still keep that picture on my phone 8 years later.
Mm-hmm.
That was the first thing that was said in the Cyclone post game by Jake Bren. He brought up that same exact play. I was even brought up on the Hawkeyes podcast, their immediate game after, with Hassel and Andrew Downs brought up that same play. And then Andrew Downs said, that's the only school this ever happens to is Iowa State.
That's so interesting one to compare it to, because that K-State game, I was actually listening to that as I was driving back from Iowa to Texas, and the K-State announcers were livid at that call, or no call, if you want to call it that. And so, yeah, it's an interesting one to compare it to. Brett, you were going to go ahead and say something?
I could see getting upset about it if Rocco Beck wouldn't have thrown it right to the defender, and it wasn't even close to the wide receiver.
You're right, but it technically was pass interference. By the rule book, that's the thing. And I agree with that 100%. The first thing I saw in watching the game was not the pass interference. I saw Rocco was having a pretty smooth game for, some of the games that Rocco's had where he's had rougher games. This was actually not one of them. But that was just a direct bullet pass to a guy that was, and it's easy to lose sight of him. When he was eyeing down Bramer, it's really easy to lose sight of that guy that's kind of lurking out of the middle secondary. So yeah, you're right. It was an interception, but by the rule book, that was textbook pass interference. So I mean,
what is it, catchable? Like,
it's,
I don't think it wasn't even close. Like,
contact started before the ball was in the air, so it's defensive holding.
Either way, again, we said we weren't going to talk about it. Now I'm mad. I'm just kidding.
That's why I'm here, Nolan. Just get everyone angry.
That's every day. Brett just texts me. He's like, you know what? Nolan was smiling today. Something's wrong. I'm going to piss him off. All right. So getting back into it, Iowa State outgained Colorado, like you said, Jared, 441 to 395. You look at that, and I mean, you see that, and you're like, sure enough, Iowa State pulled it out. Rocco, 237 yards, 1 touchdown. There was 1 interception that we are not going to continue to elaborate on. Abu Sama went off, and Colorado's Caden Salter, though, he looked way more impressive than he should have. And this is a guy that is, I'm not gonna sit here and talk down about how strong of an athlete or a football player, a college player is. There's plenty of people out there that do that, and most of them probably either never played a game of football in their life or have no idea what they're talking about if they're talking down on college kids. But Caden is, average at best in the, among Big 12 quarterbacks. And he really had a hell of a game. He carried their offense pretty much the entire second half. So defensively, what do you think got in the way?
I think their injuries to their quarterback or cornerbacks, they're just bitten by the injury bug. And I think it's throwing them off.
Could be. Having to replace the corners is one thing for sure. And putting into place an entirely new defensive playbook. But Cahill, anything that you saw defensively that stood out to you?
Yeah, we are taking our safeties out of the run game, thinking that they need to help the corners, and they're just playing like a team that's kind of scared and not mentally there. I would equate it to, when your chips are down and you lose a bad play in poker and you're on tilt and nothing seems to be going your way and you're just out there fumbling every opportunity you have. We have the guys in our front seven, or our 3-3-5, our front 6, to stop the run better than we're doing. Our linebackers are missing opportunities. We're not wrapping up. There was communication breakdowns that led to that long touchdown pass. I'm very happy we have a bye week coming up so we can work on the mental mistakes, all the penalties. Hopefully we get a little healthier. But Heacock needs to stress something to this team, focus on what can we do. I think Trey Bell and Quentin Taylor Jr. are going to be just fine. I don't think they need babysat. I don't think they need extra help.
I think they're doing just fine. Just like we talked about a few weeks ago, these guys, they were backups to 2 NFL caliber corners. They could have been starting for if not every other team in the Big 12, at least 90% of them. But yeah, something definitely. And I don't think it's one of those where, Haycock needs to rip them a new ass. It's one of those where you get back to the basics, I think. And just like you talked about the fundamentals, just in regards to when you're in a 3-3-5, what does it mean for each level of the defense? But you bring up a very interesting topic, and that is the defensive confidence. Week 1 against Kansas State, and then the next game against Iowa, and then Arkansas State, not so much. But, throughout the first 4-ish, 5 games, especially against Arizona, the confidence level the offense had in the defense even showed. The offense is playing different right now because of the defense, having that, that question mark or that lack of confidence, I feel. Because when they are on the field, it looks like they are all out of position. It looks like they don't trust themselves. It looks like they don't trust their teammates. And we got 11 guys on the field that don't trust each other, especially defensively. Like I said, that's holes in the ship, man. And that's going to sink quickly. All right. Enough about the game. It is what it is. Iowa State now has 2 losses in conference play. And looking forward, if we, looking into our magic 8 ball, and what this means for the rest of the season, I was going to ask you guys your thoughts. So we know what it means as far as record-wise. We know that 2 losses puts you in a really tight spot for the rest of the season. Like, no errors can be made moving forward as far as wins and losses, especially in the Big 12. But mentally, and just where this team is sitting mentally, physically, what have you, when they left Boulder, what did that mean for that team? Brett, you kick it off.
Well, hopefully they realize they've been here before. Like last year, had to go through how many tiebreakers to get into the Big 12 and had to have things break their way so they know it can happen. So hopefully they just go in and say it can happen. We need to take care of what we need to take care of and win out, and then let the chips kind of fall where they are. And hopefully they fall on our side of the table.
Yep. All you can do is win each game on the way out, right? That's all you got to do. Easy peasy. Jared, what are your thoughts, man?
I don't think we're off in any worse situation right now. I don't think anybody was expecting us to go 12-0 this season. But we lost 2 games by 1 score to conference opponents on the road. We are battling that injury bug, probably worse than any team I can think of, maybe outside of the 49ers. But if we can get healthy over the bye week, hopefully we get Conradi back. Hopefully we get Kaijon's Cummings Coleman. I think I finally got that name right.
Yep. You finally did it. Nice
if he
job,
gets
man.
healthy, Carson Hansen should be back after the bye week. We should stress fundamentals. Mental mistakes are hurting us. We get BYU at home. We get Arizona State at home. We go to TCU, who just got rocked by K-State. As long as we can figure out offense, Kansas can't stop anybody. They don't know how to tackle. Oklahoma State, the best thing they have going for them is Section 231. And also, the other thing is, if we go 10-2 and lose the tiebreaker and don't have to go lose to Texas Tech, I'm just fine with that.
2 losses in conference play by 1 score or less is huge when it comes down to the conference championship tiebreaker. And the other thing is that you're 4 teams sitting at 2-0, and we'll get into the standings, but 4 teams sitting at, or 3 sitting at 2-0, and then the rest are 1 or 2 lost teams until you get to the bottom. And a lot of those teams still have to play each other. So the cream will rise to the top. So they say. All right.
Speaking of cream rising to the top, what about our new kickoff specialist? Isn't that like a weaponette?
He's a hoss, isn't he?
Yeah.
Boy.
I think he'll go pro with the new rules.
He's the guy that, if you had him out there on a kickoff team, you don't want to see him as the returner if you're coming down the field.
No.
Or you do if you're shifty. But I'm just saying, if you see that guy with a full head of steam heading at you,
320. That's a big man standing between you and the goal line.
He should
just
have to look kick it and just beeline it right down the middle, and with his arms out, just taking out blockers.
He's got to be one of the biggest kickers ever in college football. To play kicker in college football and play in a game. So I'll have to look that up later. All right. Great rundown. The other aspect of that game I want to bring up. This is something that we saw it against Cincy and again at Colorado. Is it just me, or did the Big 12 officiating, did they have a meeting talking about Matt Campbell's behavior on the sidelines, dating all the way back to the Big 12 championship against Oklahoma? Because they are being strict on him this year.
I think Matt still wants to fight the ref from that Oklahoma game.
I think
just like he wants to fight still wants to go after the fan from the Ohio game.
That guy changed the trajectory of our program, I'm pretty sure.
He still goes to every game, every road game. That guy's there.
He better hope to God Matt Campbell never sees him in public. And Matt's not a guy, man. I've watched some of his Mount Union games. I would not want to come up against that guy in a fight. That is for damn sure. All right. It's a good rundown. Nice talk, boys. That's a good rundown of the game. Great perspective. Looking at the rest of the Big 12 games from week 7. So Texas Tech, Kansas comes to town. Go out there to Lubbock to get the tortillas tossed at them, as Brett brought up last week. And Brett, it's interesting you brought it up because apparently Coach Leifold was not a big fan. Did you see that?
Tortillas?
Yeah.
Well, I think it's because they're threatening penalties, which is just a conference that doesn't get it. Texas Tech fans are just trying to be hospitable and making sure that you have a snack during the game. It's like when you were playing Little League football. A mom would bring orange slices in a juice box, and, it was just a nice gesture.
That is one interesting way to look at it. I don't know if I would eat tortillas that were just randomly thrown at me, but...
Well, they do have to get snuck in, so...
Quote unquote snuck in. You're telling me that many tortillas that get snuck into, I think it's called AT&T Stadium out in Lubbock, but get snuck in there and security doesn't catch a damn one of them.
It might catch one.
How many fireball shots get caught at Ames?
That's true. I do partake in those when I go to games. Yeah, but sometimes you need them, especially when you're freezing your ass off watching Baylor. All right, so any thoughts on the game really quick, boys? I know one or both of you brought up the fact, kind of discussed really what the outcome of this game means. So 42-17, the score, I don't, maybe it did represent what happened. But Tech, does what Tech does. Over 500 yards of total offense. And Daniels was under fire the entire game. Again, Texas Tech is playing defense. Like, this should be front page news in every sports section from Texas up to Iowa. But then their offense is just insane. Their running back is just a beast, man. But anyways, Texas Tech remains undefeated. And Jared C., now I know at the beginning of the season, and actually multiple episodes, you and I have had differing opinions on Texas Tech's status as the dominant one amongst the pack in the Big 12. So what do you think this means for Texas Tech?
We're halfway through the season. They're 6-0. You brought up their defense. They've given up a total of 73 points over 6 games. They are head and shoulders above the rest of the league. It's not even close. I was wrong in my assessment. I think they benefited from one of the weakest non-cons, but it worked out perfectly. You're bringing in a whole new team of transfers. You put them against absolutely nobodies. You let them just play ball and let them build a, camaraderie that way. And they're rolling. Like I said earlier, I don't want to play them. So they are number one for a reason.
Right now, so interestingly, Texas Tech is number one offensively with 558 yards per game. Baylor is number two with 494 yards per game. And then we're looking down at defense, and this does make sense. Texas Tech defensively, yards allowed, 256. BYU, 263. Points allowed, 12.2. And then second in that category as far as points allowed is Utah. So, Texas Tech they're leading everything, boys. Transfer portal and pouring millions of dollars into it has paid off. Brett, any thoughts?
I'm wondering about losing their starting quarterback, if that will have any impact on the overall game, but I'm not holding out hope that that will be that big of an impact where they won't make the Big 12 championship game.
Yeah, that's true. When you lose your starting quarterback, obviously there's uncertainty in any situation for the rest of the season. Texas Tech is in a different spot, I think. Will Hammond, I think, is probably better than Baron Morton based off the way he played against Utah. I could almost see them being improved moving forward. All right, that's a rundown on that game. What this means for Kansas. Kansas is 4-3 right now. I think they just got to take it week by week moving forward. Daniels is who Daniels is. He can be the best quarterback in the Big 12 one game and then average the next. Lack of consistency there. Go running through the games really quick. So just looking at, Houston dominates Oklahoma State. Don't really need to go into that. Cincinnati, UCF gave them a tough game, but that was one of those games, as we've talked about others before, that, regardless of how close the game was, you just knew Cincy was going to pull it out. And then we get into Kansas State, TCU, where Kansas State is going through the season of peaks and valleys. They've been an interesting one to talk about, interesting one to look at and really kind of root for, I think, especially after week one and, everything that, the team went through personally with family members and also just the turmoil they went through in their non-con. Any thoughts on that game, boys? Kansas State pulls out the win 41-28 over TCU.
My thoughts on it are good for K-State. I didn't get to watch the game. I know that TCU had a backwards pass and then a pick six that really hurt them, but it looked like, seeing highlights and whatnot, that Kansas State was the better team, and it actually makes me feel better about having to go to Fort Worth in a month and a half to face TCU.
I'm glad it makes you feel better. I'm going to be at the game, so that's bad news for all of us. My record as far as going to Iowa State games and if they win or lose.
We spoke last week about how, for some reason, K-State always plays TCU tough. And just there's something about that matchup that I don't think TCU can figure out. And it showed.
It is interesting.
As far as going down to TCU, I still don't think that'll be a win.
We'll have to see. We got a long road to go, but it's going to be a tough one. And yeah, it is interesting how there's just those teams that one team will struggle with no matter what year it is. Just like of all teams, Texas, one of the biggest thorns in their side, two of the biggest thorns in their side in the Big 12 conference in football were somehow Kansas State and Kansas, which was just crazy. All right. So we get into the night games or the nightcap. For those of us that couldn't sleep that night and were up late, we had two fun games to watch, one of which was I guess not such a competitive game, but we're looking at Utah and Arizona State, and that's one where obviously there's one big factor that stands out here. Levitt was not playing. Arizona State's backup, I'm drawing a blank on his name.
Jeff Sims.
Jeff Sims, yes. And how long has he been playing college football?
This is his 6th year.
All right. Jeff Sims, I was hoping you'd be a little bit better by now. But you get thrown in the mix playing Utah. That's not an easy one to go in on. But yeah, he only threw for 124 yards. I mean, Arizona State just offensively was dead in the water. But Utah also knew, hey, you know what? You're not going to be effective throwing the ball. Focus on the run, which they shut down relatively well. And Utah blew them out. Devin Dampier, who has caught a shit ton of criticism since the Texas Tech game, that dude ran for 120 yards. He ran for more yards than he passed for. And that's a big hoss to be running for 120 yards. And that guy's he's thick. But yeah, I didn't, watch the game from beginning to end, but overall, Utah goes ahead and dominates. Any thoughts on that? Otherwise, we can move on.
I have some thoughts. Utah, they finally won their first home game as a member of the Big 12 Conference.
That's a big one.
They did it in the pouring rain against a quarterback who's not the starter. He started one game last year. That was a game that they lost to Cincinnati. The year before that, he was a starter at Nebraska. He had 47 pass attempts through 6 interceptions. This is who you guys are going to hang your hat on. It's like, oh, we beat Arizona State. You beat a shell of Arizona State. Utah, still overhyped. I think they lose next week. I can't wait for it.
That's going to be a hell of a holy war, I'll tell you that much. Yeah, that's it. And I'm going to play devil's advocate here. Because, yes, they get the criticism, Utah does, for not winning, their home games in the Big 12. And did they bring it upon themselves? Absolutely. They came into the Big 12 running their mouths. We're gonna run this town, and we're gonna dominate the hell out of it for a few years. And we're gonna go to the Big 10, which is not gonna happen. The Big 10 isn't interested. But not only that, their coach is constantly throwing a fit about anything related to the Big 12, whether it be officials, whether God knows what. He's always talking We're talking, a little bit of game, I should say, in press conferences afterwards. I don't have anything against him, but at the same time, it just kind of got annoying. So, yeah. So last year, it was somewhat kind of bittersweet to watch them get treated how they got treated. But at the same time, I guess getting to a point where I feel like no matter what they do, they're not going to get credit. They're going to nothing short of going to the Big 12 championship and winning, I think will reset the minds of other fans in the Big 12 saying Utah is legit. So it almost feels like, what some of them have to be sitting there going like, God, what do we have to do? So just like UK Hill saying like, well, this was a second string quarterback. You beat a shell of them. So, well, yeah, but it is the team you got to play. But any other thoughts on that? Nope. All right. The other nightcap game, BYU and Arizona, which was a hell of a lot more entertaining. Arizona looked like a different team than the one that played in Ames. They were scrapping, they were fighting, went all the way down to double overtime. And then I'm going to be honest, the second overtime was really disappointing. And BYU comes away with it. I'll just toss it over to you guys. Brett, I don't know. You probably didn't have a chance to watch the game, I'm guessing.
No, I'm old. I was in bed.
You were in bed, Jared. Were you able to stay up late enough to watch this one?
Yeah, I watched pretty much the entire game. Arizona looks pretty good at times. They looked this way against K-State. They looked great early in the game against BYU. Again, fell apart towards the end. BYU, great defense, but they were able to find their way around it. So hopefully that shows that, BYU has some holes in their defense.
Noah Fafita, when we were playing Arizona a few weeks back, that was the Noah Fafita I was scared of. Not the one that played in Ames. The one that can run and gun, and he doesn't necessarily blow you away with yardage, but he just makes plays. BYU, though, their rushing attack, that's something that, that's a problem for other teams. LJ Martin had 162 yards on the ground. And then the Bear Bachmeier, again, a guy with that name, how can you not be a badass? He ran for 89 yards and passed for 172. So that guy is the craziest, tough-ass quarterback wearing number 47 out there. But it's awesome to see. BYU is looking pretty damn solid right now. They're looking like a contender. I know that everybody's got hurdles on all their schedules going into until we get to Arlington, but BYU is looking pretty tough. It was, regardless, no matter what team you're playing in the Big 12, if you got to go to double overtime to win and you do it, you walk away with your heads high because this is a tough ass conference, and Arizona showed up that day when a lot of people were kind of down on them. We're going to move into the next portion of the episode, which is previews for next week. And then we're going to get into the Big 12 standings. Kicking it off, Arizona goes into Houston. Arizona, as we just said, is, a team that maybe is figuring things out. Houston's a team that was riding high, undefeated until they ran into a wall that was called Texas Tech. There's kind of a lot on this game for both teams right now. It might not be the game that when you're flipping through the channels on Saturday, you're going, you know what, this is one that I want to watch. But as far as implications for the rest of the season, there's actually a lot riding on this for both teams. Jared, your thoughts?
This is going to be a great game. I really couldn't tell you what I think. Maybe Arizona, but maybe only because I've seen so much more of their games than I have Houston. Houston's quarterback, when I did watch them play Colorado, super impressive, and they are at home. So who knows? I think it'll be a great game.
Yep. Yeah, no, everybody forgets Houston's quarterback is Connor Wigman. Just like I said, a lot of people, they forget about it because Houston. And Houston's not a team that, let's face it, very often you talk about when you're talking about football. You get to college basketball season, and then we start talking about Houston. But Connor Wigman is a proven quarterback. And, when he was at A&M, he was not bad there either. So that guy's always a threat when they're playing. Arizona's a 2.5-point favorite right now. Again, you don't just walk into the Houston Cougars stadium and expect to walk out with a victory, right? I mean, that's just a threatening environment. But, Brett, thoughts on the game?
I think Houston being at home, their defense, the inconsistency of Arizona, I think Houston's going to pull it out.
Interesting. Very interesting. This is one of those toss-up games. I wouldn't place money on it if I was a betting man. This might be one of those don't touch games. I could see either one happening. Moving on, Baylor and TCU. TCU is currently at TCU. TCU is currently a 5.5-point favorite. Looking at this game, TCU's just got to limit the turnovers, man. But they also they better lock down in the secondary. We all know what Baylor brings when they show up, and if they get their passing game in a rhythm, you're in trouble. So any thoughts
TCU
on this?
In this one?
Like TCU?
Home game. It's got that little bit of rivalry vibe to it with them being so close. And I got a feeling TCU is going to win by a couple scores.
That's interesting you bring up the rivalry game because a lot of people in the Big 12 don't, Texas, the state of Texas is its own nation down here. And that's something you realize when you move from the Midwest and you move down here. When you talk about football, there's rivalries between every team that they're fans of other teams in the Big 12 have no idea even exist. TCU and Baylor hate each other. Their fan bases absolutely hate each other, just like TCU and SMU absolutely hate each other. And yeah, this is a heated rivalry game, very much so. Jared, your thoughts on this one?
It is a heated rivalry. You brought up the SMU game, that rivals. I think a lot of people forget that all these Texas schools were in one conference years ago, the Southwest Athletic Conference. It was Texas A&M. It was only Texas schools and then Arkansas. And then that broke up when some of those schools moved to the Big 12, and then the rest of them got relegated to lesser conferences. But yeah, this is a long-running, deep-seated hatred between these teams. I think Baylor's got the better offense. Can they stop anybody? Maybe not. TCU by 5.5. I'm going to go with the opposite of Brett. I'm going to say Baylor wins this.
TCU's got a very incredible stadium. Been there multiple times, and it does get loud in there. There's just something about the place. It's hard to say that depending on the game that they have home field advantage. It's just one of those where it's not hard for opposing teams, depending on the team, to go in there and win. But it has played a factor in some games. I have seen it firsthand. I don't know. I'm going to say, in this case, I'm going to say that TCU ekes this one out. And strictly, because of the reason you brought up, Jared. That's the fact that if Baylor's defense is, running around like chickens with their heads cut off in the secondary, Hoover can pick them apart. But also that could go for the same for TCU's secondary. I don't know. This is a little bit of a toss-up for me as well. I don't understand why it's a 5.5-point spread. But again, that's the reason why I don't have a job in Vegas. So looking down the rest of the slate here, UCF at West Virginia. Moving on. No, just kidding. Go ahead.
I would like to say one thing about that game. I think Central's going to lose to West Virginia.
Wow.
I don't care either way. Folks. I just wanted to say Central.
That is sneaky bugger. Middle Florida, if you will. Wonder if they're still getting pissed off about that. But yeah, I mean, there's really not. West Virginia is favored by 3. We'll see. I mean, who knows? UCF, Central Florida, Middle Florida started out the season strong for the non-con they had, and it's been downhill ever since. West Virginia is just being, who knows right now. But that's going to be a game that maybe we'll read up on it later. All right, moving on. So Texas Tech goes to the desert. This was a game that was on a lot of people's radars at the beginning of the season because it was a potential preview of the Big 12 championship. So now here we sit. Leavitt is he still questionable? I haven't looked it up right now.
When you're in a boot one week, it's not likely you're starting the next week.
You know, I mean, we say that, but Mateer for Oklahoma had surgery on his hand 17 days ago and then played football, which blows my friggin' mind. So,
and how did that work out for him?
Well, you know, I'm sure Oklahoma fans probably would love for us not to talk about that, but yeah, it's true. But, you know, the miracles of modern science nowadays, or modern medical science, however you want to word it, and the fact that players are able to come back so much quicker. And I have not even really looked in depth at what, you know, Leavitt's overall injury is, but at the same time, you're right. If he's in a boot, I'm assuming he's not going to be playing. If he's not playing, then this game is just, you don't even have to really talk about it. What Tech did to KU times that by 2.
I don't even think it would matter if Leavitt was playing.
You don't think so?
No,
I think Tech was going to win either way, with or without him. The spread's 11.5. Yeah, Tech is going to win out.
All right, I would agree with you, boys. All right, BYU at Utah. There's another game. We're going to save that one for us. Cincy at Oklahoma State. Moving on.
I was thinking that exactly.
Unless Jared, I don't know. Do you have any breathtaking thoughts on this one?
It's another home game for Oklahoma State, so we might get to see more action in Section 231.
Oklahoma State fans, freaking amazing. That's all I got. You know what? Not just Oklahoma State. That one man that went over there and stood by himself with his shirt off, swinging it around his head, and then was joined by 2. And then the 2 became 4. And then the 4 became 20. And then next thing, what was it? Like almost 200 of them? I think we're up there, something like that.
It was 3 full sections.
Just amazing. And the thing is I would have loved to see a panned out camera angle of the stadium, because it would have been every male in the stadium was over there in this section, and then on the other side it's all of their significant others and just other females.
I actually assume it was just one guy whose girlfriend pissed him off, so he went over there to be by himself and be alone.
She said
he got
she was
surrounded
leaving.
by other assholes. Yeah.
You know what? I'm leaving. Okay, well, I'll find something to do. I mean, the game itself, it's hilarious. I love that they still show up. We know what that's like. We know what it's like to go to Ames, go to the stadium, knowing you're going to get your ass kicked, but you still have fun, right? I love the fact that not just him, but then like you just think there's 2 guys sitting over there in a section. They're like, you know what? Let's not let him be alone. Let's go be with our brother. Let's go stand over there with our shirts off too. And then it just spread like wildfire.
Well done. Like, I want to know what beer company is now going to sponsor that section.
Dude, that guy needs NIL money.
Legend. Like, he needs a statue built.
Yes, he does. Absolutely. In a season of darkness, there was a shining light.
Starting a movement. If they win the national championship next year, that guy needs to be handed the trophy.
I think he started something.
It.
I think every team that is having a shitty season, you're going to start seeing more and more shirtless dudes standing in empty sections in stadiums moving forward. All right.
Wishful thinking there, Hoff.
You know, I mean, I'm not even going to comment on that. All right. But Cincy does, they whatever. All right, Sorcy's going to do what Sorcy's going to do. Their running backs are going to have a heyday, and there's going to be another bunch of shirtless dudes swinging them above their head like a helicopter. As, what was it?
Petey Pablo.
Petey Pob. All right, moving on. The game of the weekend for the Big 12. The mighty, mighty Holy War, where a stadium with 2 teams, jam-packed with people from Mormon backgrounds, come to clash over the sport that we do so love, which is football. And it's going to be one hell of a game, because we just talked about stipulations riding on some of these other games, and the outcome of this game has a huge impact moving forward for either team. So I'm going to toss it over to you, Jared. Thoughts on the Holy War?
I got BYU in this all day. There might be a bias here. I just think they're a more complete team. Devin Dampier is not a downfield threat. BYU is set up to stop the run. Utah's, good in the trenches. Bachmeier, for as good as he's been, he is a freshman and could be prone to mistakes. But I do like BYU here. I don't think they're getting enough love nationally. I think Utah is just kind of overhyped. More on that later about my feelings on Utah, but I'll keep that out of the game predictions.
Do you think BYU doesn't get enough love because their quarterback wears number 47 on his jersey?
I think he doesn't get enough love because his first name is Bear, and it's not a nickname.
I take him way more seriously due to the fact that his name is Bear. I'm not effing with a guy named Bear.
Do you want to face a bear? I don't.
How about his brother Tiger?
I know.
Who's also dangerous.
Just think about that. His friends get into it with somebody. Don't make us call Bear, or don't make us call Bear and Tiger. I would immediately question my decision. All right.
I didn't know he had a brother named Tiger. So
well, yeah, they talk about it every BYU game.
Influenced my pick, and BYU all day.
Yeah, the announcers every single BYU broadcast find a way to bring up his brother's name, Tiger. All right.
He plays on the team.
Yeah, he is. Is he actually? Does he play a lot?
I think he's a punt returner.
Is he a punt returner? All I know is
every
BYU game I've watched, they bring up, and it's not even if he's on the field. Has a brother on the team as well named Tiger. But anyway, so yes. So you're picking. I'm sorry, Jared. You said you were picking BYU in this one, and Brett, you were picking
BYU as well.
BYU. Interestingly enough, even though this game is out in Provo, Utah's favored. But again, Devin Dampier put on a hell of a show last week. Odds makers are a silly bunch. We'll have to see. This is going to be one of those game time decisions for me as far as who I actually think will win. I agree with you. I don't think BYU is getting enough respect. I also think Utah, in some cases, isn't getting enough respect. Both teams have showed questions in their defenses this year as well. So it's going to be whoever shows up. I could see either one winning. I'm not going to make a pick in this one. I can see
make a pick.
Stop. I'll drop a sack. I'm taking Utah. I think Dampier built some confidence last week, and he's going to show up. Jared's shaking his head at me.
Yep. Overrated.
All right. Well, I will be wrong, as I always am. And good luck to both teams. Like I said, what this means for them as far as their standing as far as getting to Arlington is huge. Hopefully there's not a bunch of fights at the game. I know that's a heated rivalry, and the fans don't like each other at all. All right. So getting into the next portion of the episode, so we are going to jump into the Big 12 standings and championship odds led by Jared C. himself. Jared, take us away.
All right. The current standings after last week's play, we have 3 teams remaining unbeaten in conference play. We got BYU, Texas Tech, and Cincinnati. BYU and Tech undefeated overall. Cincinnati did have a non-con loss to Nebraska. Then we have, 4 teams at 2-1 in conference play. Utah, Arizona State, Houston, and Baylor. Arizona State and Baylor have non-con losses. Then we get into the 2-2 teams. Iowa State, Kansas, K-State. Both the Kansas schools have non-con losses. Then we're down to the teams with losing records in conference. Arizona, TCU, both 1-2. Colorado 1-3. Central, West Virginia, Oklahoma State have yet to win a game in conference. So that's the standings. You can basically, once you have 3 losses in conference, you're done. There's no point in talking about you as far as having a legit play. Yeah. I do feel that it will be probably Texas Tech unbeaten, and then everybody else will have 2 losses, but it'll try to figure out how many teams are still left with only 2 losses. So that's the standings as far as record. I am going to give you my power rankings for the week.
Let's hear it.
I only have 11 teams on my power rankings because they refuse to rank a team if they don't have a winning record. Tech, number 1 by a mile. Then I have BYU. They're undefeated. You got to give them credit. Utah, despite what I thought about that game against Arizona State, they blew out who I do think is probably the second best team in the conference, maybe Arizona State. But after that, so Tech, BYU, Utah, Cincinnati, they just keep rolling. Houston, 5-1. You can't hate on that. Baylor benefit by having a bye week. Arizona State looked terrible with Jeff Sims. Arizona lost a game they should have won against BYU. TCU got blown out by K-State, Iowa State all the way down to 10 in my power rankings. You lose 2 in a row.
Yep.
But at least we're not Kansas. I have them last.
Yeah.
And they already have 3 losses on the season, only 2 in conference, but they're not going to play for a conference championship. They're going to lose several more games. So in the next 2 weeks, we'll probably be down to maybe 6 teams left in consideration.
Yeah, I would agree with you there. Yeah, that's quite a drop for Iowa State. Deservedly so. Who would have thought that this, we'll say, even 2 weeks into the season, we'd be sitting here talking about Cincy and Houston being in the top 5 in the power rankings. But overall, I think this is a perfect rundown. Brett, what do you think of Jared's power rankings?
I like them. The big drop for Iowa State, obviously. You can't lose 2 games, especially coming off a bye. It wasn't a good showing for them. The top sounds right, and we'll start seeing who is filtered out in the next 2 weeks.
Yep. Who comes out of the Royal Rumble, if you will. And looking at the standings as well, man, we got those 3 teams at the top. In BYU, right after they play Utah, they've got to turn right back around and go to Lubbock, man. And then they got Cincy still left on the calendar as well. So BYU, these 3 teams are going to fight it out for who's going to be undefeated. God help us if they're all 1-loss teams at the end of the season. Yeah, and then it could be from 4 all the way down to 12, a bunch of 2-loss teams, like Jared said too. So it'll be an interesting run to the finish here. Selfishly looking back at Iowa State, this is what I said. Iowa State, as Gary Gaines said in the Friday Night Lights speech, be perfect, right? That's what they're going to have to be. Pulling up just to compare it, Texas Tech being number 1, and this is in the 247 sports power rankings. BYU at 2, Utah at 3, Cincy 4, Arizona State at 5. Is that right? Let me check the date on this. Yeah, it's after week 7. Arizona State still at 5, according to 247 Sports, which is interesting, knowing that Levitt's status being unknown. Then Baylor. They still got Iowa State up there at 7. Then Houston. Then TCU, and then Arizona. So that just goes to show you, it's all who you're talking to about the Big 12 and what they see in each team. And that's what makes this conference so damn fun. Thanks again, Jared, for giving us your power rankings. I know that there's a wild method to the madness behind coming up with those. I don't challenge myself to do it every week, and the fact that you do is absolutely awesome. So thank you for how much thought you put into that. Pulling up 247 Sports right now, looks like, just to compare it, they have Texas Tech at 1. Obviously, I think everybody does. BYU at 2, Utah at 3, Cincy at 4, Arizona State, shockingly, at 5. The only thing I question is there somebody in their media department that didn't get the news? Baylor sitting at 6, Iowa State at 7, which is shocking. I feel like they should be lower, just like you did, like you had there. Houston at 8, TCU at 9, Arizona at 10. Don't really need to go any lower than that. So again, it just comes back to power rankings are based off of who you're asking and what everybody sees in each team. And the thing that I love about the Big 12 so much is it's so damn chaotic outside of one team right now that it all depends on what you were watching in every game to see the strengths and weaknesses of each team. All right, moving on. Just going to take a look into the Big 12 championship odds, across the conference. Jared, I'm going to throw this back to you and just get your thoughts on, in taking a look at it, what teams are more favored that maybe should not be, and what teams maybe are those dark horses that are sitting out.
Like you mentioned, Tech is number 1. Should be. You got to bet more money than you would win on them. I do think Utah's overhyped at 2. BYU, unbeaten team, should be in that number 2 spot. Cincinnati, where they should be. Arizona State looks right. I agree. Once you start getting into the multiple loss teams with Win healthy with Levitt, is where I'd put Arizona State. I do think Iowa State's far too low.
What are they sitting at right now?
They are, 9th, I think?
Okay. That sounds about right.
Plus 6,000. We are tied with K-State in odds to make the championship odds.
I'm going to Vegas this week.
Games.
It's a good chance for me to put some money down, maybe.
Well, like I said, Houston's going to lose another game. I think if BYU takes care of business against Utah, they're at 2 losses in conference. Arizona State's losing this week to Texas Tech.
So Utah would be at 2 losses in conference if they lost to BYU. And then BYU, there's a good chance that they they could be at 2 losses.
Well, I mean, they come to Ames. Hopefully they get their first loss there. And then I think their second to last game of the season, they go to Texas Tech, I believe. So I do think every team in this conference outside of Texas Tech is going to have 2 losses. There's going to be a log jam at the top. It's going to be 4 or 5 teams that all have 2 losses, and it'll come down to tiebreakers.
Yeah, BYU goes to Lubbock the first week of November, and then it doesn't get much easier. TCU comes to town, and then they go to Cincy, and then they play that mighty Central team. But yeah, there's a good chance that we could have a logjam at 2 losses. All right. Any dark horses out there towards the bottom that you think could make us shocked?
Nope.
All right.
Nope.
So you're telling me that West Virginia is not going to go on a run. Fine.
You heard it here first. Central's not going to make the championship game.
Just once. It'd be nice to hear Country Roads at AT&T Stadium. I'm just saying. But, well, thanks for the rundown, sir. That's an overall rundown of last week's games. Post-mortem for Iowa State versus Colorado. The boys got a break this week, so it's much needed. Hopefully they can figure out a way to get their S together and be ready, as we come into our next games. Brett, I'm going to send it over to you, and Brett is going to give us a review of the Iowa Hawkeyes. Iowa played a very tough Wisconsin team. I say that jokingly. Last week, and then they even have a tougher game coming up this next week. So, Brett, tossing it over to you, man.
Wow, was I wrong? I think I predicted the score to be 3-0 or 2-0 with absolutely no offense and a lot of punting. And Iowa took that to heart. I'm sure they all rallied around and said, hey, this small little podcast, this guy said we're awful. And they just took it to Wisconsin and found something that they've been looking for, and that's called offense. And they were really impressive, and it was kind of fun to watch Iowa in Madison when they played jump around, and the Iowa sideline was going crazy, jumping around.
Were they the only ones in the stadium jumping around?
No, the fans were.
There was
the
fans
Wisconsin
still
side
there?
was not. There were. I think they were just waiting for jump around.
Yes, they left immediately after.
Just how demoralizing would that be for the football team that the fan base right after it's done just empties out?
And the broadcast even called it out. They're like, yeah, Iowa's jumping around. They're really enjoying this. And Wisconsin, not so much. So it was good. It was good to see that. They're still in the state of Iowa, so you still got to root for them. And they went up there and they put it to Wisconsin.
That's a great rundown, Brett. And I would like to point out that I was the one between the two of us that picked Iowa to win by 2 scores. And I do have loyalty to, some players that I coached back in the day that ended up, going on to become Iowa Hawkeyes, no matter how painful that is to see them do things in the Cy-Hawk game. But yeah, overall, Iowa fans are we're truly hoping for and have been hoping for Gronowski to be that quarterback that they did hype up so much prior to the season. And, is he killing it as far as statistics? No. 107 yards through the air. He's not as mobile right now as they were hoping for. Obviously, he sustained an injury a few weeks back, but, their running game is really carrying them. You got Kamari Moulton, who had almost a 100-yard game, Xavier Williams, and then, Nathan McNeil, both contributing as well. So, it's when you look at the numbers there, it was just Iowa taking advantage of Wisconsin's mistakes. Takeaways were the big thing. So looking into next week, who do they got, Brett?
Looks like they are playing the mighty Penn State.
Coachless Nittany Lions, which just paid $50 million for somebody to go away. That is the best firing a man could get.
How do I get that job?
I know, right? That's usually what Nebraska does really well.
Be just bad at what you do, and they're like, here's a bunch of money, go away. Yes, please.
I said that about Nebraska for years. That's why I applied for the coaching job for them when they fired Callahan. Yeah, I applied for it because it was a state position. I just wanted to see my name put in the paper. But anyway, so yeah, they play the Nittany Lions, who are coming off a rough week, and who knows how many guys will still be playing for the Nittany Lions when they meet when they meet Iowa this weekend. And it is in Iowa City, which, it pains Iowa State fans to admit it. It's a friggin' tough place to play. Iowa fans get up big time for the games against Penn State, and they're a hurting unit coming into town. And I don't know the exact rules. I haven't read up on any changes to them, But when a coach is fired, essentially players can start entering the portal immediately. So
I would imagine their phones are just ringing off the hook because they've got talent.
well, their starting quarterback is also out too.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Jared, what do you think, man?
It's a crazy swing from what the, preseason. I think Penn State was favored 15.5 in this game, and now Iowa's picked to win, favored by 2.5. Penn State's underperformed. I thought they were overhyped last year, but they had everything in position to make a run this year. Everybody came back. Yeah, that team has quit. They're the first team to ever lose 2 games in a row when favored by 20-plus points.
It's
And
interesting.
you're in Kinnick. Iowa's going to roll.
You bring
That
up a
team's
hell of a
quitting.
point when you talk about they quit already. You lose to they were the first team that UCLA led against the entire season. And then you
They got
go
their
and
ass kicked by UCLA.
yeah, and then Northwestern is a team that almost every Big Ten conference team, when they have to play, it doesn't matter if you play at Northwestern in that, I don't know, Little League stadium that they put on, or every team marks that as a win. It's that team had quit already. Coach being there or not, who knows? It could be a rough game for Penn State. I'm going to pick Iowa to win this one. Iowa tends to be their toughest opponent in most games. They kind of shoot themselves. But if Iowa does what they did last week and they get in a groove offensively, this could be a 2-score win. I don't know. It's tough. It's always a wild card when you have a team in Penn State situation.
Well, if you're picking them by 2 scores, I'm going to say it's going to be 3-0
That's what you
because
said last
one of
week.
these times I'm going to be right.
Yes. It's just like picking C on a multiple choice
Yeah.
test.
Yeah.
All right.
Like I'm doing the probabilities in my head.
You heard it here, folks. You heard it here. All right. So thanks, Brett, for giving us the rundown on the Hawks and finally getting that dominant win that they've been wanting to see, even though, like I said, some of the players aren't standing out as much as they wanted them to. But at the same time, you can't complain about a 37-0 win in the Madison jump around environment. So moving over to Nebraska. Nebraska goes to Maryland. And Brett, I know you and I last week were joking around about how, has anybody even ever spoken about how tough it is to play at Maryland? Nebraska goes in. It was a tough game. It was kind of one of those where, looking at, I was watching the game as I was going back and forth between others. Nebraska would kind of start to show signs of pulling away and then coming right back. Nebraska, 260 yards in the air, 193 on the ground rushing. Overall, I think this is a solid win. I mean, Maryland was a 4-1 team. Nebraska was a 4-1 team. You look at conference, what that means as far as conference standings, especially now in the Big 12 or Big 10, and you're looking at 1-loss teams. That's the crazy thing, is these wins for Nebraska and Iowa both have a ton of weight on them. But yeah, Dylan Raiola ends up the day with 260 yards. The thing is again, much like we were talking about with Iowa's offense, Nebraska just shoots themselves in the foot. And Patrick Mahomes Jr., which, being a lifelong Chiefs fan, I'm going to say this: Dylan Raiola had very much a Patrick Mahomes bad game, where he scores 4 touchdowns, 260 yards passing, but he somehow throws 3 interceptions in that game as well. And like I said, that's a typical Patrick Mahomes bad game. Emmett Johnson for Nebraska. This guy is something that people should start recognizing because he is a beast. 21 carries for 176 yards. And then this Nazia, I can't remember how they pronounce his first name. Nazia Hunter for Nebraska, 125 yards on 5 catches. Again, like we talked about a few weeks ago with TCU's receiver, NCAA 26 type statistics and 2 touchdowns. So all around a very balanced game for Nebraska. They just really, I don't think Maryland would have really been in this game if it hadn't been for turnovers. I mean, overall, Maryland, decent passing, but defensively, Nebraska shut down the run. This was, defensively was very much what Nebraska likes to see out of their defenses. Any thoughts on this?
Good win for Nebraska. Again, I want them and Iowa to continue to win. Can't wait for that Black Friday game and then just watch a bunch of drunk people punch each other.
You know what? Normally I would say I like to be at a bar, usually in Omaha or Council Bluffs, and I enjoy going and watching that game as the bipartisan fan, but I don't want to be anywhere near those 2 crowds sitting there next to each other if both these teams win out. But Nebraska goes in to play the Golden Gophers next week. So row the boat, bitches. But yeah, so they're going up to Minnesota. Right now, Nebraska's a 7.5 point favorite. Minnesota's a scrappy team. No, they're not a team that anybody's really talking about, but they're 4-2. They've been a thorn in a lot of Big Ten team sides, year in and year out, where they pull off some upset over some team that really needs to continue to win.
Especially like night game or like the off game they're playing on a Friday. Mm-hmm. Like that just screams to me like the Gophers pulling it out by a late field goal or a punt return that's not a punt return.
Hopefully they don't have to pull off a late field goal like they did last year where they missed it and the guy up in the booth didn't get the notes, the fireworks guy that's supposed to push the button, and he fired off the fireworks after they missed the game-winning field goal.
That is awesome.
Anyways, so Nebraska's got to travel up to Minnesota. Minnesota right now, like I said, 4-2 team. Overall, their offense is not the best. I think it's 106th in FBS. Scoring-wise, they're 77th. Defensively, a little bit stronger, but it's truly going to come down to if Nebraska's offense can own Minnesota's defense. But overall, lastly, we're going to just take a really quick look at the Big Ten standings.
Well, real quick, I want to comment a little bit on that game. Nebraska ranked for the first time in 10 years.
So glad you brought that up. I forgot.
Minnesota's 4-2, but Nebraska getting ranked. What a great way to send out Matt Rule.
The first time in 10 years.
Before 10 years he's been ranked, or they've been ranked. I think Minnesota's going to win this game. Matt Rule's already planning his exit strategy out of Nebraska. He's trying to get that Penn State job. The AD at Penn State was his AD when he was at Temple, and he made Temple a thing. He has all the ties there. He can't win the big game any more than Franklin can, but I can see them wasting several $1 million to figure that out.
I mean, I don't know. The thing is Matt Rule's gone to Nebraska, who God knows how many coaches have tried to win there since Frank Solich and haven't been able to do it. And look what he's doing now. And it's like you give him Penn State money, you never know.
He had Baylor money and couldn't get it done. He had NFL money and couldn't get it done. And what, you don't think Nebraska has as much money as Penn State?
I don't know. You hear some of the fans whining and all that about how they're broke compared to other teams.
Well, Nebraska fans are already acting like, well, Matt Rule would never leave us. Like they're 5-1 and ranked, and they're already talking like they're like a dynasty again.
Yeah. In their defense, and Iowa State fans say the same thing about Campbell too. No, he would never leave Ames. It's like, I mean,
no, Matt Campbell would take that job if offered to him. I don't think he'll get that offer.
No, I could see that too. But no, you bring up a really good point. Thank you for bringing up the fact that they're ranked. And that was something that I noticed something next to their name when I was looking at the standings the other day. I was like, there's a number. Holy moly. Nice job, Nebraska. So just really quick look at the standings. Saw one hell of a shocking game this weekend. Indiana, the team that everybody said, sure, Indiana can go undefeated, but they can't beat anybody when it counts, and not the good teams. Indiana walked into Eugene, and the score doesn't really show it, but just kicked the shit out of Oregon. Ohio State's doing Ohio State things. USC sitting up at number 3 in the Big Ten right now. Good for you, USC, after just getting freaking kicked ever since Reggie and Matt left back in the day. Oregon's hanging in there. And then, lo and behold, here sits Michigan right there with one loss. And I almost feel like we should have trumpets blowing. Right now, it is early in the conference slate, though. Northwestern at 2-1, sitting right there. The mighty Northwestern Wildcats. But Nebraska's up there. Washington right behind them. Iowa right behind them. Minnesota 2-1. UCLA 2-1. So from 4th all the way down to 1, 2, 0, 1, 2, I don't know, 9th or 10th. I'm not going to count. All tied. So Nebraska and Iowa win out. Either way, somebody's got to play Indiana or Ohio State if one of those two teams doesn't make it. There's a chance. So both those teams got a lot riding on each game every single week. So good luck, Iowa fans. For any of you that are going to the game this upcoming weekend, it's going to be a hell of a game. Iowa fans can comfortably go to this game and expect a win, I feel like. But, I don't want to say that and have it bite them in the ass. Nebraska fans travel well, and Minneapolis isn't that far away. So any Nebraska fans traveling up to Minnesota, have a great time. Do us all a favor and don't get into it too much with the Minnesota fans. They can be feisty. So any other thoughts, boys, to close out?
I have one thing I had heard said on a podcast recently by somebody that covers the Big 12 and Iowa State specifically. Jake Brenn on Bigger Than 12 was talking about last year how Iowa State and Arizona were playing in the championship game and how that's not the best look for the conference, that the conference will be better served this year by Utah and Texas Tech representing because they have bigger images nationwide, and that makes the conference look better. I think that's a real bad take. No, Utah was a team that 14 years ago was in the Mountain West. They've accomplished nothing ever. They do not have this big brand that people think they do. They won the Pac-12. Who gives a shit? The Pac-12 hasn't been relevant ever. They don't even exist for a reason. And when the other teams were picking the teams they wanted from that shithole conference, they didn't take Utah. Utah just won their first home game. Utah can go fuck themselves. I'm out.
Well, let us know your true thoughts on that. That's an interesting take by Jake Brand. And that's, I mean, obviously, I think Jake knows well enough too, as well. Like when he says something like that, he's going to ruffle a lot of feathers around the conference when he says shit like that, especially when you put Utah in that statement. You know, and Texas Tech, like saying that, I don't know, that's an interesting one. You know, I love Lubbock. I love their fans. I never really had a bad feeling ever about Texas Tech. So when I say this, I don't say this, you know, I'm not trying to offend anybody, I should say, but I'm saying this in a very just high level, factual, however you want to say it, observational way. Texas Tech is not a nationwide brand, or I don't know how to say it. They're not a team that you rely on to really increase engagement, I think, for a conference.
I wholeheartedly agree. They have all the money in the world to push their product, and good for them. Maybe I was a little too harsh on Utah. Well, you know what, Pat Mahomes, what team he never beat when he was in college.
That is true.
They reside in Ames.
Thank you, Joel Lanning.
Maybe I'm a little too harsh on Utah, and maybe it's just not their fault, it's just public perception, but I don't understand how they're like, oh, they're this nationwide brand. Like, they're not.
I really appreciate you taking the gloves off and just letting it ride, man. We need more of that out there. All right. Well, that was a hell of a venting session. Nice job, buddy. All right. Well, good episode, gents. The boys got a week off, so we can watch football without any stress level this weekend. We've got some great games coming up for the rest of you Big 12 fans out there. Have a hell of a week. Iowa fans, have fun this weekend. Hopefully you guys go in there and, well, do what you should do against a Penn State team that's in the shape they're in. Nebraska fans, go up there and represent. Hopefully the Huskers walk out of Minneapolis with another win in the column. But that's going to wrap it up for us. It's getting late. Everybody, enjoy a cold Busch Light on us. And thank you for listening to the Loyal Sons podcast. We'll do better next time. All right. Jared, Brett, have a good evening, gents.
So, yeah, you
have a good one.